All the world's religions, spiritual teachings, and mythologies nest the exact same personal teaching. And it's not religion. That's just the pretty carrying case. I've discovered the keys to get through the layers down to the deepest nested teaching, a lesson that was put there by the prophets, the sages, and the gurus thousands of years ago. And I'm ready to pass those keys along now. Interested? Let's get started. Hi everyone, I'm Daniel and welcome to Just One Truth. And yes, it is my contention that Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and more, all of them nest the same secret teaching. The identical nested truth is contained within the religions and mythologies of different times, different cultures, and different places. And those were meant to be the carrier for this truth. Not everybody had access to it. People didn't want it. The truth was spread around by putting it in something that people did want. It's going to take us a little time to lay it all out. It took me a long time to find it. And even though I can accelerate the process for you, it's still going to take a little bit of work to unpack it. In this process, I don't tell you what to think or believe. That's for the religious layer, the shallower layer. That's what they do. I give you the keys, you unlock it for yourself. I am not here to convince anyone of anything. This is simply for the seekers who question everything. So what do I mean by the terms layers, nested teachings, and keys? Well, the nested teaching is what we're going after. The prophets, the sages, and the gurus from antiquity, they had lessons to teach. And those lessons were very difficult, and they were very personal, and they were very hard. And not everybody wanted those lessons. So you couldn't just tell stories, or you couldn't tell your lessons to the general public and have that get spread around. People would think you were a nut. They didn't pass it along. They're only for the seeking people. And that's what we're going after. They wanted the lessons to be available to anyone at any time. That's where the religions and the mythologies come into play. Those are stories that contain the lesson, that contain the nested lesson. And they are stories made in such a way that they'll get the widest possible dissemination. People either love the story, they love to pass it along, or they had some sort of a faith base around that story and insisted on carrying it so aggressively that they weren't going to let it go. Your lesson was going to get the widest possible dissemination as long as it was nested inside of something that everybody wanted to carry. The keys are what it takes to look inside and get to the nested lesson. We're going to bypass the outer layers. We'll see what they are. We're going to look at them. We're going to discuss them a little bit because it's really important to see all of the pieces in order to understand how it works. I'm going to start with a teaching story, though, that only has 2 layers. It's not a religious one, but it works the same way. And everybody knows what these are, and everybody knows how they work. I'm going to go with a fable. I'm going to go with Aesop's fables. The Hare and the Tortoise. And I'll just briefly go over the story for anyone that might need a refresher. The Hare and the Tortoise. So the hare is very fast, and he sees the tortoise who is very slow, and he teases the tortoise for being slow. The tortoise, however, says, "I'll race you." And the hare, amused, says, "All right, let's go for it." And they race. The hare gets so far ahead that he takes a nap. Upon awakening from his nap, he looks down the course and sees Tortoise is about ready to cross the finish line. Quickly, he tries to catch up, but it's too late. He lost. The moral of the story is, it's slow and steady that wins the race. Even that requires some kind of mental thinking, though. If you were like me as a kid, I remember thinking, wait a minute, slow and steady wins the race, but only because the hare took a nap. The hare was faster. If he didn't take a nap, he would have won. Why wouldn't the moral of the story be something like, when you're ahead, don't take a nap? There could be other reasons for it. Well, in this case, the author tells us it's slow and steady that wins the race, so we have to we got to work at that. Fables stand the test of time. They're always viable. So we can take that fable today and make it something that we understand. Let's take an example that most people are probably familiar with. Physical health and condition is a worldwide issue today. We probably all know people or ourselves have been in positions where you decided one day, boy, I've had it. I've been too lazy. I need to get in shape. And you see an ad for some exercise equipment or a gym membership that's discounted. And you go buy a bunch of gear. You invest some things and you say, I'm going to get in shape. And you just get off the sofa. You get rid of the bag of potato chips and you go for it. And you apply yourself for a week or 2 or 3, maybe a month. And for some reason, you find yourself back on the sofa worse than before. Your $1,000 exercise equipment has become a coat rack in your living room. And you didn't succeed. That's a metaphor for the hare, taking off, attacking something aggressively, and not really sticking with the plan, not going at it slow and methodically. The tortoise, however, would be that person who says, I got to change my life. They quietly go about their business. They don't buy equipment. Maybe they go buy a new pair of walking shoes or something like that. Day to day, they just take charge of their life, working at it bit by bit, without a lot of flash. They meet other people along the way that are on similar journeys. They gather up as buddies and work together. And they have a better chance to succeed because they stuck with it and they didn't go at it so aggressively crazy that it dropped everything else out of their life. They didn't make radical changes that they couldn't hang on to. They make gradual changes, and gradually working at it, they succeed. Then the story makes sense to us. We can work with that. But why would you embed the lesson in there? Why wouldn't you just say in plain language, it's slow and steady that wins the race? People wouldn't carry that story around. They would tell you, that's boring. I don't want to tell people that. That's not a fun story. So you nest it inside of something that gets the widest possible dissemination. Even the people that don't agree with you, that slow and steady wins the race, they won't know that that's nested in the story. They will help you by passing your story around. You've used them, I guess. What you've done is create a fun story that contains a lesson and it's spreading far and wide. Aesop's fables are said to come from a guy named Aesop who was a slave in Greece 500 years BC. That's the time of Buddha. That's 2,500 years ago. These are old stories. They've been around for a long time. Spiritual teachings, and by spiritual teachings, I mean teachings that are about the self and don't contain God and salvation. They're a personal teaching. They contain 2 layers. They're constructed in the same way as a fable, except that they deal with your soul or your personal self. Religious teachings, especially the Abrahamic ones, have 3 layers. There's an additional layer in there that's the religious layer. That's really the pretty box that carries religion far and wide. In those cases, the teachings, again, are very personal. They're very inner. They're very about love and forgiveness and kindness and looking for a state of being that is nirvana, that is the kingdom of heaven within. It's an inner peace. And a lot of people will not buy off on that. They would tell you, shut up and get away from me. I don't want to hear it. Or I'm not going to forgive anybody. Or I'm not going to admit to anything. A lot of people have a lot of pain and they're not going to look at themselves. They will not pass along the prophet's inner teaching, but they will pass along the prophet's shell, the layer, the outer story. They'll grab that and spread it all over the place. Religion, mythology, those are vehicles to carry a teaching. Let's look at it a little bit further. I'm going to make up some verses with 3 layers, and we'll look at the 3 layers. And I'll make them up so nobody can argue about what they mean. Okay, the first verse. 3-layer verse. This is very much a Buddha-like or a Jesus-like one-liner. You familiar with the Sermon on the Mount? It'll be a verse like that. I'll construct it in the same way. The verse is, an anchored ship cannot sail. On the surface layer, The shallowest layer, we know exactly what it means. It's very literal. You put a ship in the water, throw out the anchor, and it's not going anyplace. And that's all it means. It's about the physical world. It's outward looking, and it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the world out there someplace. If the verse was standing alone, if it was just a sentence, that might be all that it means. But we're assuming that this verse is contained within a body of work, a group of spiritual verses or a group of religious verses, and we therefore know then that it contains a deeper meaning. This brings us to layer 2. It's a metaphor. This is where the verse becomes about us and our life. It's about our physical being and physical reality. A person might look at it and realize, the ship is representative of me, and the ocean represents my life. And the anchor is something that I'm hanging on to. And we can all easily see that. It might be something like the person realizing, I'm in a dead-end job. And I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to sail free. I'm not going to live the life that I want. I'm not going to live to the fullest because I'm staying here where I am. I'm not committing to leaving, to getting out, to moving on. And that interpretation would be true for that person. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Someone else may come along and say, well, no, the verse is about me and my lack of education. I need to take some more classes or whatever the case may be. But they interpret the verse, again, it's about them, and the anchor is that they're holding themselves back by not furthering their education. Again, that would be true. Both of those are still about the physical world. They're about us personally, but it's still about life conditions on the planet, in the physical world, in the flesh. A third person might look at it and say, nope, it's about me and my relationship. I'm in a horrible relationship. I'm in a bad relationship. I'm afraid to leave. The person I'm with doesn't work. They're not successful. They're not helping out. But I have personal fears and I don't think I'm going to get anybody. But at some point they realize I'm anchored to something that is not beneficial to me. I'm not moving on. They're afraid to leave for some reason. And again, that verse would take on a meaning for that person that's different than the other ones, but they all represent the same idea, that you're holding on to something that is preventing you from succeeding in life. And again, they're outward looking. They're about the physical condition of the world, of life, of your life. A fourth person might look at it in a religious context. And they could read into it and say that I'm not fully committed to my relationship with Allah or God or Jesus or whatever the case may be. And that the verse is telling me that I need to commit myself fully, completely, 100%. Only in that way will I receive the blessings of God and go to heaven. And to that person, that would be a true verse, but it suddenly becomes something that's a little more nebulous. It's still about something physical, it's still about something outward looking, but it's very personal to that individual. And there's many other possibilities. Layer 2 is where the diversity comes in. Layer 2 is where most people get to as they read verses and they think, it's a metaphor, it's about me, or it's about my life, or it's about my life conditions, or it's about the people over there, or the people over there, or something, somehow, some way that is still outside of them. It's still physical looking, as in it's looking at the outer world. This is where incredible diversity comes into play. This is where people can interpret it all over the place. This is why we see 33,000 different Christian denominations today. The verses become unclear at this level, and people make it what they want. Layer 3, however, that's the nested teaching. That's the one we're going for. That's where the verse is looked at in a completely different way. And this is key number 1. This is the first key. It's about me, just like in layer 2. However, it's not about my relationships or my job or my education. It's about my heart and soul. It's about my emotions. It's about my inner being. I turn the verse inward, and it becomes very personal, and it becomes personal for anybody who reads it. It's about what's in my heart and in my mind. Was I hurt as a child? Was I perhaps abused? Physically, verbally? Probably both. Was I degraded and belittled and demeaned? Was I raped, molested? Many people have those experiences, and they live with those experiences, and they harbor those experiences. And they're hurt from them, and as a result of being hurt from them, they hold anger, they hold shame, they hold judgment, they hold behaviors. No, they hold thoughts that lead to behaviors that are very natural and very normal. But holding on to them creates conditions in our lives that we somehow continue to repeat some cyclical behavior, perhaps getting involved in relationships all the time that are bad relationships. And when one ends and you move on, everything is wonderful for a time, and then you find out, oh, it's turned bad again. Why does this keep happening? Why are guys like this? Why are girls like this? It's because of what you're harboring up here. Are you conducting yourself in some manner that's a cyclical, very destructive behavior that hurts yourself and the people around you? And you're doing that because of things that you've got tucked away up here that you're hiding away. You are anchored to those things, and because of that, you don't sail free. And that is layer 3. Layer 3 is when it becomes about me, or you very personally at a deep level. That's how the verse nests a teaching in 3 layers. And you can see that if you tried to tell people what the lesson was and pass that along, people would not do that. So many people are hurt or in denial, or they're not the seeking kind of a person. You nest that spiritual, that deep personal teaching in something that is more palatable to everybody. They will pass it around, and at any point in time along the way, somebody who knows the keys, that it's supposed to be about me, and that's just one of the keys. We've got some more to cover. If they know the keys, they can glean from the teaching what is personal for them. Before I move further along, I'm going to let you know that even though I'm a fan of the teachings of Jesus, I'm not a Christian. I was born in a Christian home, but I had reason to leave that behind. At the same time throughout life, I experienced something that was beyond my 5 senses that always told me something was there. Having had those experiences, I maintain a lot of curiosity about what there must be beyond us. So I studied world religions. And after becoming religiously literate from all teachings from around the world, or many teachings from around the world, when I went back and took another look at Jesus, that I realized, wow, you have to read him in a certain way. And you've got to separate him out of the Bible. The Romans, as far as I'm concerned, are what turned him into the Son of God. Jesus never said, worship me, and I got this. He laid out a list of things to do. The Romans are the ones that just said, worship him, accept him as your Heavenly Father, and you're going to heaven. And that's what people do. And to me, that's what ruined the teachings of Jesus. Although they're still there, they're still nested inside, they're combined in a body of work, and you've got to separate that out. You got to read Jesus in a vacuum. I take him out of the New Testament. I take him out of the teachings of Paul and John and all of the other books that are attributed to them. To be honest, I don't know that Jesus ever existed. Kind of like Lao Tzu, the Buddha, the authors of the Bhagavad Gita, any of our ancient teachers, I don't know that they existed or not. People today have a need to believe that they actually existed. I don't view it that way. I look at it like they left behind a body of work. They left behind a teaching. They left behind something for us. Whether they left it behind or it came from somewhere else or it was an accumulation from Their society at that time doesn't matter. What matters is that's what we have to work with now, and that's what I go with. Like the Buddha, Jesus taught peace, love, and caring. Feed the hungry, clothe the poor. He didn't say build walls. He said, I am not a divider. When you look at right-wing Christianity or evangelical Christianity today, you see very divisive people, very judgmental. The very opposite of what Jesus taught. I don't go there. That's not Jesus. I'm convinced Jesus is not coming back to save the Christians. My question is, how do you save Jesus from them? I do want to make it clear about something. I said earlier that there were 33,000 different Christian denominations in the world today. 33,000. That's astounding. I can't imagine any documentation that would produce that kind of results. Imagine sending students to math class and they've got a test that day, and there's 33,000 students that go in there, and the test is one question, and every student comes up with a different answer, and the teacher says, "You're all right, go home." Are they educated? Do they know what's going on? Each one of them would say, "Yep, I got it. I'm right." So when I say it's not easy, I can assure you a Christian would say, then you don't get it. It is easy. Well, standing from the outside looking in, I don't agree. It might be easy for them inside their head, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it's right. But within those denominations, there are millions upon millions of Christians who are very loving and peaceful and kind people. When I use the term Christian, it's difficult to keep all of that separate. Sometimes I might use the wrong term, and I apologize. I'm not picking on everybody. I'm looking for people that follow Jesus, not people that follow Christianity. I got a saying, be like Jesus, not like Christians. I have wonderful friends that are Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, atheists, Wiccans, New Agers. You name it, it doesn't matter. I'm not friends with them because of what they believe in. I'm friends with them because they're good people, because they care and love other human beings. It doesn't matter what their color is, what country they're from, what political party they belong to, what religion they belong to, whether they're male or female, whether they're gay or straight. None of that matters to them. They know that that's not their job in this life. Personally, I'm of a mind that if a God ever did show up, this loving creator, father, if this God ever did show up, this God would not look at you and judge you based on what you believed and how much time you spent on your knees worshiping them. This God would look at you and say, what have you done on my behalf? What have you done to help your fellow human beings? What have you done to take care of this home I gave you? To me, that's what any God worth their salt would be saying. The takeaway here is that when I talk about Jesus throughout this video series, I treat him as if he's a spiritual teacher that's on a par with the world's greatest spiritual teachers. I don't treat him like the Romans specified Son of God, returning Savior who was coming to save people who worship him. I treat him as somebody who taught something that is very viable and valuable for humans. It's on a par with the Buddha and Lao Tzu. It's on a par with many teachings. There is just one truth. Jesus taught that, as did the others. They just used their own language. Okay, now the second example, the second verse. 3 layers once again. The verse is, you can't dry off while you're standing in the rain. The shallowest surface layer, the outward-looking layer, is literal once again. Stand in the rain and try to dry off. It's not going to work. That's it. There's nothing more to it. That's a true statement. It's outward-looking and you're done. Layer 2, that's where the complexity comes into play. That's where it becomes a metaphor, so people have kind of permission to make it what is important to them. We'll see in this verse that it's very similar to the first verse, the one about the anchored ship that cannot sail. In this case, metaphorically, being in the rain is code for being in a situation that is not good for you. It's not healthy for you. It's not making you happy. Or maybe it's actually hurting you. Drying off is a metaphor for being happy or being successful or getting out of the situation that you're in. Maybe it's a job that you really are struggling with. Maybe you're in a cubicle farm and it's just very difficult for you. I've had that happen to me before. Maybe you're in a relationship that is just very harsh. Perhaps it cyclically continues to hurt you and you're looking for success, but you're not leaving that relationship or you're not quitting that job. You want to be happy, you want things to be different, but for some reason you stay where you are. There's layer number 2, and it can be for anything like that for anybody who's trying to interpret it. Again, we see that it is a metaphor, but it's also outward looking and it's about the physical world. It's about relationships or jobs. And even though that deals with your happiness, it still hasn't turned it inward. It still hasn't gone that last turn and gone inward to your heart and soul. When we do that, we realize that there's something that we're harboring. If you're staying in that job and you're not committed to it, you hate it, but you're not making the choices to leave, or if you're in that relationship that cyclically continues to hurt you and continues to bring you down, and then maybe you think it's okay and then it collapses again, then that's a metaphor for standing in the rain. But why are you doing that? Why are you doing those things? What is it about you that you harbor up here? Is it past pain? Is it feelings of self-doubt, fear? There's something that you're carrying inside of you at a deeper level than the physical world that's causing you to stay in the situation that you're in. And that's the deepest teaching layer. And that's the layer where, once again, if you told people that in plain language, most people would not pass that along. They wouldn't want to share that. People don't like to admit that it's about them, or they have too many fears that it's about them. If they're not ready to turn inward, they won't hold that verse. It will be meaningless to them. In fact, they will say it's stupid. Realistically, they might need it. However, when it's nested in a story of not being able to dry off when you're standing in the rain, that might easily get passed around as some humorous kind of a comment that you make to somebody. And anybody will pass that along. They don't know that it has a deeper meaning, but the person that understands it has a deeper meaning and they know the keys to get to it will be able to turn that teaching upon themselves and realize that I have to get into my own head and make some changes. There again, we see how to get to the deepest nested teaching in a verse that is 3 layers. Okay, one final verse in this video. Let's actually grab a Jesus verse this time. The first 2 verses that I made are going to coincide with one that Jesus has, and it parallels something that he taught. All of them do. So let's take a look at this. 3 layers again, and now that you've seen the other 2, you'll instantly see how this one works. This is from Matthew chapter 23 and is verse 26. You blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. So what this says is clean the inside of your cup and plate, that the outside of them will then be clean as well. A religious thinker that is a literalist, a biblical literalist that says you don't read into it, they're not going to get anything out of this verse except wash your dishes. That's it. Fortunately, there's not a lot of thinkers like that around today, although you will find most Christians are a blend of the two. They'll take a verse like this and they'll read into it and say, okay, I know what that means. It's something about me. But then they'll turn around and take Genesis and say, like, the creation story and the flood story are historical stories. They won't interpret those. They will only interpret little pieces like this. The layer 2 is variable, and I'm not going to get into a lot of different interpretations. Anyone can Google that and see that from all the Christian websites, there's quite a variety of interpretations. The vast majority of them hinge upon the idea that it is a metaphor and that the cup and the plate represents us, who and what we are. We're on board with that. Yeah, that's good stuff. But that what it means is that it isn't simply good enough to act outwardly. and to treat people nicely when you're inside of yourself thinking or feeling otherwise, that you don't like them, that you judge them, that you don't feel good about them, and you're just pretending to like them. That's the hypocrite part. And I'm okay with that interpretation. I really am. But you can see that it's still shallow. They would say that that's important because that's how you get to heaven, but it doesn't get into that layer where you turn it inward. That's where we're going to get at layer number 3. We turn it inward, and yes, we're the plate and we're the cup. And it's not enough to simply act and think a certain way. There's more to it than that. We've already seen from the other ones that we possess conditioning in ourselves, either from experiences or from the way we believe something, how we perceive, how we judge stuff, how we judge people. And that those judgments and those fears and those shames create in us, when we're not paying attention, life conditions that continue to replicate, things that cyclically turn out bad. And it might not always be that you're having a bad time. It could be that you are treating somebody else poorly. There's still a lot to this that we haven't covered yet. But the behavior and the way that you act outwardly is based on what you harbor inside of you. If you're treating people poorly, you've got some reason inside of you to be that way. Most of us see people like this from personal experience, either friends or relatives. I have relatives that are religious, that are very hypocritical. They would talk about love, peace, and kindness, but then you realize they're only doing that within their group of people. Or maybe in groups of people that they have no affiliation with, but they would just as quickly begin posting on social media very hateful things about other groups, other political groups, other religious groups where I have friends that come from those groups. Yeah, they're not my kind of people. Those are the hypocrites right there. They don't see it that way. They believe, because of other things in the Bible, that somehow their hatred and judgment is justified. Is the inside of their cup clean? I don't think so. And then we know that by looking at and examining those things that we harbor within us, that by cleansing them, what does that mean, cleansing them? Cleansing the inside of our cup means to change our experiences. How do you stop thinking about something that you don't like? You have to stop disliking it. Cleansing the inside of your cup isn't simply looking at it and trying to appease God. You've got to look deeper than that. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about your life. It's about your experiences in life. And it's about the way your life unfolds for you. There may or may not be a God involved, and I'm not here to dispute that. I've got my own feelings on it. But the reality of it is, you have to go much deeper than what that Christian layer would teach. So that's layer number 3. Okay, with that, I'm going to bring this video to an end. I've got to start working on the next one. This one's gone on longer than I thought. It's the first one, and I'm kind of struggling with getting it flowing smoothly. Please bear with me. If you like the content and you want to hear more, subscribe and hit the bell. Like it. If you don't like it, go ahead and hit the I don't like it. Do whatever you want to there. The next episode is going to be about the soul, the spirit. What is that? And how do we heal the soul? How do we heal our spirit? Till then, everybody, be safe and look inward. There's just one truth, and we're going to get to it.